The darkest psychology is not that of the corrupt politician who steals it, is that of those who vote for him knowing they will be robbed. Stop for a moment. Let that sentence echo in your mind. Feel the discomfort it causes. Because it is precisely this discomfort that you have spent your entire life trying to avoid, and it is this discomfort that has brought us here. We live in a unique time in human history. We have never had so much access to information. We have never been so educated. We have never had so many tools to detect lies and manipulation. And, paradoxically, we have never chosen such visibly corrupt leaders with such awareness of what we are doing. It is not ignorance. It is not a lack of options. It is something much more disturbing. It is an active, conscious, and psychologically complex choice. You know what I'm talking about. That moment in the voting booth when your hand hesitates over the number. That second of silence when you really know that you are about to vote for someone who does not deserve your trust. But you vote anyway. And then, when the first signs of corruption appear, you are not surprised. You are relieved. Because, deep down, that's exactly what you expected. This is the dark psychology of our age. We have developed a sick relationship with disappointment itself. We are not victims of a corrupt system, we are its architects. And the most devastating proof of this is that when we have the chance to change it, when the moment of choice arrives, we actively choose to keep it exactly as it is. Arthur Schopenhauer, the 19th century German philosopher, had a disturbing theory about human nature. He believed that we are governed not by reason, but by a blind and irrational force he called will. A force that pushes us to make choices we don't understand, driven by impulses we deny we have. What if he's right? What if every time you walk into a voting booth, it's not your rational mind that's in control, but this blind primitive will that whispers in your ear, choose the familiar, choose what won't challenge you, choose what will allow you to continue sleeping, because that's what corruption offers, the sleep of the conscience. When you vote for the corrupt, you no longer have to take responsibility for the results. You can just say, I knew this was going to happen, and feel smart for predicting the obvious. This is not a conversation about party politics. This is a conversation about something much deeper, about how our own psyche betrays us, about how we become complicit in our own destruction, and about how we develop a sick intimacy with disappointment. Brace yourself. What you are about to discover about your own nature cannot be unlearned. And once you see how this dark psychology works, you will never again be able to pretend that you don't recognize it operating within you. When reality hurts too much, there is a moment we all know but few admit to. It's that fleeting instant when you're watching the news and see yet another political scandal exploding on the screen. For a split second before your rational mind kicks in and starts coming up with justifications, you feel something you shouldn't feel. Relief. Not relief that corruption has been exposed. Relief that your suspicions have been confirmed. Relief that the world is exactly as rotten as you imagined. And in that microscopic moment of brutal honesty with yourself, you understand something disturbing. You wanted it to be that way. This is the first shard of the broken mirror, the moment when you realize that your relationship with corruption is much more complex than you imagined. You are not just a passive victim of a corrupt system. You are an active participant in its maintenance. Think about the last election you participated in. Not the one you tell others about, but the real one, the one that took place in the privacy of your mind. Remember that candidate who had an interesting proposal, but you dismissed because they had no chance of winning? Remember the other one who seemed too honest, and that bothered you because nobody is like that? Remember how you ended up voting for someone who didn't excite you, but who you at least knew? This is dark psychology at work. It's not that you chose evil, it's that you actively rejected good because it made you uncomfortable. Because good requires something from you that you weren't willing to give, genuine hope. And genuine hope is dangerous. It makes you vulnerable. It forces you to admit that you want something better. And that implies responsibility. It's much safer psychologically to choose someone you don't completely trust. That way, when the inevitable disappointment comes, you can say, I knew it, and feel smart. It's a sophisticated form of emotional self-preservation. You protect yourself from disappointment by ensuring it happens. But here's what really happens behind the scenes of your psyche when you make these choices. You're constructing a narrative about the world that justifies your own passivity. Every time you vote for the least worst, you reinforce the belief that there is no better alternative. And every time you confirm that belief, you become a little more cynical, a little more complacent, a little more complicit. Let's be more specific. Have you ever wondered why the most corrupt politicians are often the most charismatic? Why do those who steal with style get more votes than those who are competent but dull? The answer does not lie in the ignorance of the electorate. It lies in a deep psychological preference. We prefer to be deceived with class than to be confronted with competence without charm. The charm of the corrupt offers something that the competence of the honest does not: entertainment. The corrupt allow us to live a fantasy where politics is a spectacle and we are just spectators. The honest force us to admit that politics is responsibility and we are participants. And being a participant is much more work than being a spectator. Here is a concrete example of this psychology in action. Think about how many times you have heard someone defend a corrupt politician with the phrase, "At least he steals and gets things done." This phrase is revealing because it accepts corruption as a given and adds efficiency as a mitigating factor. But what it really reveals is something darker. The person saying this is expressing a perverse admiration for the ability to combine competence with dishonesty. It's as if we were saying, "I respect someone who is skilled enough to steal from me right in front of my face and still convince me to support them." There is a morbid fascination with this ability, as if we see in the corrupt politician a more daring version of ourselves, someone who does what we would like to do if we had the courage. And here we come to the most disturbing point of all. Complicity is not born of fear or ignorance. It is born of identification. When you vote for the corrupt, a part of you is saying, "I understand you. I would do the same thing if I were in your shoes." It is a silent acknowledgement that corruption is not an aberration, it is a possibility that exists within each of us. This explains why corruption scandals rarely destroy politicians for good, because the public doesn't identify with innocent victims being harmed by incomprehensible monsters. The public identifies with ordinary people who, when placed in a position of power, did exactly what any normal person would do. The mirror is broken because it reflects a fragmented truth. We are simultaneously victims and accomplices, innocent and guilty, deceived and self-deceived. And the only way to deal with this contradiction is to develop a sophisticated psychological skill: the ability to believe two contradictory things at the same time. You believe that corruption is wrong, but you vote for corrupt politicians. You believe that you deserve better leaders, but you reject candidates who would demand more of you as a citizen. You believe that the system needs to change, but you behave in ways that keep it exactly as it is. But there are moments like this, when someone holds up a mirror to you, when the explanations fall away, and you see the naked truth. And that truth leads us to an even more disturbing question. If we recognize these patterns, why do we continue to repeat them? What is so powerful in our psychology that we consciously choose what we know will hurt us? Wake up, work, pay bills, sleep, and repeat it all over again the next day. Life goes by like this, and one day you realize that time has slipped away. Dreams were postponed. Opportunities went unnoticed. This happens because no one ever taught you how to see the game of life the right way. But there is another path. If you want to reach the next level, you need to access new knowledge. And that's exactly what you'll find in the White Rabbit Codes. This book will open your eyes to what is really happening. You'll understand why you keep getting stuck in the same cycles, learn how to escape autopilot, and start seeing the opportunities that were always there. And finally, you'll make decisions that truly lead to the life you've always wanted. If you feel ready for this change, the link is in the pinned comment. You'll be surprised at how simple it can be to increase your prosperity. Success is a decision. The choice is yours. Complicity never announces its arrival. It creeps in quietly, disguised as pragmatism, realism, knowledge of how the world works. And when you finally recognize it, it's already so ingrained in your way of thinking that removing it would be like trying to extract a part of yourself. Have you ever noticed how people talk about corruption in groups? There is an unwritten script, a social choreography that everyone knows but no one has taught. First comes the performative outrage, "It's absurd. This can't go on." Then, almost inevitably, someone whispers the phrase that changes everything, but everyone does it. And at that moment, something magical happens. The whole room relaxes. The moral tension dissipates. Because that simple phrase, "everyone does it," is a master key that opens the door to collective complicity. It transforms a moral problem into a fact of life. And facts of life don't need to be changed, just accepted. But here's what really happens in this ritual. You're not just normalizing corruption, you're including yourself in it. When you say, "everyone does it," you are simultaneously absolving yourself of the responsibility not to do it, and granting yourself permission to do it when the opportunity arises. It's an elegant form of preventive corruption. You corrupt your own moral compass before you're even tested by it. And you do it publicly, in front of others, creating a network of mutual complicity where everyone watches each other to make sure no one is naive enough to try to be honest. Schopenhauer understood this dynamic deeply. He knew that the greatest enemy of morality is not pure evil, but organized mediocrity. Absolute evil is rare and easily identifiable, but mediocrity is viral. It spreads through small concessions, small justifications, small everyone does it, until it becomes the atmosphere we breathe. And here's the most insidious part. This atmosphere of normalized mediocrity creates an environment where being honest becomes an act of social aggression. When everyone around you is participating in the same theater of cynicism, your refusal to participate is not seen as a virtue, it's seen as arrogance, as a silent accusation against everyone else. Think about how many times you've heard someone criticize a person of integrity with phrases like, "He thinks he's better than everyone else," or "All saints are suspicious." These phrases reveal something disturbing about our collective psychology. We've developed antibodies against honesty because it makes us feel bad about ourselves. The integrity of others is a cruel mirror that reflects our own lack of it, and the most efficient way to deal with that mirror is not to improve our own image, but to break the mirror. We turn the person of integrity into someone suspicious, someone who must be hiding something, because it is psychologically more comfortable to believe that everyone is corrupt than to admit that we choose to be. But there is another level to this dance, more subtle and more disturbing: complicity through admiration. Have you ever felt a twinge of envy when you see a corrupt politician get away with yet another scandal? Have you ever found yourself thinking, "What a smart guy," when someone uses their position for their own benefit without getting caught? This admiration is not accidental. It reveals a secret fantasy that many carry, the fantasy of impunity. When you admire the corrupt person who got away with it, you are vicariously living through them a version of yourself who has the courage to do what you don't. And this vicarious admiration is a form of participation in corruption without taking the risks. It's like rooting for the villain in a movie. You can feel the transgressive pleasure of seeing someone break the rules without having to bear the moral consequences of breaking them yourself. The corrupt politician becomes your dark alter ego, doing for you what you would like to do but don't dare. And here we get to the heart of the matter. Complicity isn't just about allowing others to be corrupt. It's about using the corruption of others as an outlet for our own moral darkness. When we vote for the corrupt, we're not just choosing a political representative, we're choosing someone to represent the dark side of ourselves. This explains why so many people defend corrupt politicians with a ferocity that seems disproportionate. They are not defending the politician, they are defending their own complicity. Because admitting that the politician is corrupt would be admitting that they consciously chose corruption. And that is a psychologically unbearable truth for most people. So we develop elaborate psychological defenses. He may steal, but at least he gets things done. He's corrupt, but he's our corrupt. I'd rather have a competent thief than an incompetent, honest person. Each of these phrases is a masterpiece of self-deception, a way of maintaining complicity without admitting it. The dance of accomplices is just that. A collective ritual where we pretend that our moral choices are natural inevitabilities. And once you learn the steps of this dance, once you become fluent in this language of justifications and rationalizations, something inside you changes permanently. You are no longer able to see corruption as an aberration. You see it as the rule. Arthur Schopenhauer looked at humanity with the eyes of an anatomist observing a corpse. There was no romanticism in his view, no illusions about our fundamental nature. And what he saw was disturbing. Beings who believe they think, but who are actually thought by forces they neither understand nor control. For Schopenhauer, human reason is not the pilot of the ship, it is merely the co-pilot trying to rationalize the decisions that a blind pilot has already made. That blind pilot is what he called the will, an irrational, primitive, and relentless force that governs all our actions, including our political choices. When you're in the voting booth, you believe you're making a rational choice based on careful analysis of proposals and competencies. But Schopenhauer would say that you're being driven by much more primitive forces: fear of change, need for belonging, desire for protection, envy of others' power. And your rational mind just constructs elaborate justifications for what this blind will has already decided. This would explain why logical arguments are so ineffective at changing political preferences. You can't convince someone with logic about something that wasn't decided by logic in the first place. It's like trying to heal an emotional wound with math. The tools just don't match the problem. But here's where Schopenhauer's analysis becomes truly disturbing. He argued that this blind will is not accidental. It has its own logic, a logic of survival that often contradicts our rational interests. And one of the clearest manifestations of this contradiction is our tendency to choose leaders who harm us. Think about it. From the point of view of psychological survival, choosing a corrupt leader makes perfect sense. It confirms your cynical view of the world, which means you don't have to hope for anything. And hope is dangerous, it can be destroyed. It's much safer for your emotional stability not to hope than to hope and lose. Schopenhauer understood that human beings are creatures who prefer the certainty of misery to the uncertainty of happiness. When you vote for the corrupt, you are choosing the certainty of disappointment over the uncertainty of positive surprise. And psychologically, that is a rational choice, even if it is objectively self-destructive. But blind will operates at even deeper levels. It doesn't just make us choose badly, it makes us like choosing badly. There is a perverse pleasure in confirming your worst suspicions about humanity. When the politician you voted for without believing in them inevitably disappoints you, you feel a dark satisfaction. I knew it. This satisfaction is not accidental. It serves an important psychological function. It makes you feel smart without requiring you to be brave. You can have the experience of being right without taking the risk of trying to make things better. It's a sophisticated form of moral superiority that requires no moral action. And here we get to the heart of Schopenhauer's theory applied to politics. We don't choose corrupt leaders despite our intelligence, we choose them because of our misdirected intelligence. Our ability to predict that we will be disappointed becomes an excuse to ensure that disappointment happens. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but one that offers immediate psychological rewards. Every time you vote for the corrupt and they turn out to be corrupt, you get a small dose of intellectual dopamine. You were right. And that little pleasure is addictive. You start looking for opportunities to be right about bad things because it's easier than risking being wrong about good things. Schopenhauer called this active pessimism, not just seeing the world as a bad place, but actively working to keep it bad because it confirms your worldview. And once you develop this active pessimism, something inside you breaks permanently. You lose the ability to genuinely believe that things can get better. Political corruption then becomes not just a social problem, but a psychological solution. It offers a simple explanation for all the world's problems. Politicians are all corrupt. And once you have that explanation, you don't need any more. You can stop thinking, stop worrying, stop trying. It's what Schopenhauer would call cynical nirvana, a state of mental peace achieved through the complete abandonment of any positive expectations. And this state is addictive because it offers relief from the existential anxiety that comes with the responsibility of trying to make a difference. But what if this blind will could be recognized? What if we could see the invisible strings that pull our choices? To understand this, we need to arrive at the most uncomfortable moment of this journey. The moment when we stop analyzing others and begin to truly analyze ourselves. Is this content making you reflect and sparking new ways of thinking? If so, click the Super Thanks button just below the video. It's a way to say thank you and help me bring more content like this to those who need to reflect on life. We have arrived at the moment you have been avoiding since the beginning of this conversation. The moment when all the analysis of others, all the dissections of other people's psychology, all the explanations of how people behave, turn to the only place that really matters, you. Because here is the painful truth. While you were comfortably analyzing the psychological mechanisms that make people choose corrupt individuals, you were unconsciously including yourself in that category. You are not an observer of this macabre dance, you are one of the dancers. And the most devastating proof of this is not in your latest electoral choices, it's in how you felt while listening to this analysis. If you recognized yourself in the patterns I described, if some moments of this conversation made you uncomfortable, it's because a part of you already knew all this. And you continued to make the same choices even though you knew. This is what Schopenhauer really meant by blind will. It's not that we are ignorant of our own self-sabotaging mechanisms. It's that knowing them does not free us from them. On the contrary, it often makes us more sophisticated in justifying them. You may have spent this entire conversation thinking about specific politicians, specific voters, specific situations that confirm everything that has been said. But I ask you, how many times have you thought about your last vote? How many times have you really asked yourself, what inside me chose that? Because here is the darkest secret of all. Recognizing these patterns in others is easy and even pleasurable. Recognizing them in ourselves is unbearable. And so we have developed an impressive psychological skill. we can perfectly understand the mechanisms of self-deception while applying them to ourselves in real time. It's like being both the magician and the audience of the same trick. You see how the illusion works, but you continue to be fooled by it. And the most disturbing part is that you want to continue being fooled, because the alternative, waking up completely, would require you to take on a responsibility that you are not prepared to bear. The responsibility of admitting that you are not a victim of a corrupt system, but a co-creator of it. The responsibility of recognizing that every conscious vote for the lesser evil is a brick in the construction of the world you claim to despise. The responsibility of understanding that your complicity is not an accident, but a choice renewed with every election. And here we come to the final paradox of this journey. Knowledge does not set us free, imprisons us even more, because now you can no longer play the innocent victim. Now you know that you know. And continuing to make the same choices after knowing that you know makes them infinitely more morally weighty. Schopenhauer was right about human nature, but he was incomplete about its possibilities. Yes, we are governed by a blind will that pushes us toward irrational choices, but we are also the only species capable of recognizing this blind will, and occasionally choosing to act against it. The moment you recognize your own complicity, really recognize it, not just understand it intellectually, is the moment something inside you can change. It won't necessarily change, but it can. And that possibility, however small, is the only real hope we have. Because here's what no one wants to admit. The corrupt system we criticize so much only exists because millions of people like us make choices like ours. It's not maintained by a malevolent elite, it's maintained by a majority who prefer familiar corruption to uncertain honesty. And if that's true, and you know it is, then the only real way to change starts with the only person you have complete control over, yourself. Don't change the world, change your next choice. And then the next one, and then the next one. Not because it will solve everything, but because it's the only thing you can do that isn't a lie. The most corrupt person is not the one who steals public money. It is the one who steals your ability to believe that things can be different. And that thief, that voice that whispers that everything is inevitably bad, that there's no point in trying, that everyone does it anyway, that thief lives inside you. And you, throughout your entire life, have been his accomplice. The question is, will you continue to be?
If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You're subscribed to the channel, you watch the videos, you reflect on every idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to take this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the White Rabbit Codes is ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.